Hello and welcome to R+B Chats. I'm Sarah Broughton, principal of Roland Broughton Architecture, Urban Design, and Interior Design. And I'm super pumped today to have Cassie Branum from Atlanta. Hi, Cassie.
Hi, Sarah.
How's it going?
Great. How are you?
Hanging in there, thank you. So Cassie is a badass. She is co-leader of urban design at Perkins&Will. And is in the Atlanta studio, but is often found traveling the world, working on amazing projects that we love to jam out and talk about. So her energy and her thought leadership is something that really, really drives me. So thank you, Cassie, for being here today. And Perkins&Will, a little bit about Perkins&Will. It's amazing that the firm was started in 1935. You guys have 2,700 team members today and are scattered around the world with 24 studios. So it's really impressive. And as a side note, I got to know Cassie this year. We have been partnering on going after a project together. In the conversation we were just having, I just let her know, for me, it's been a real professional highlight for my year to be working with Cassie and her fellow colleagues at Perkins&Will. So thank you for the opportunity to have been collaborating with you this year.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping for many years to come.
I know.
This is just the start.
Cool. Well, let's jump in.
Yeah.
My first question is, one of the things that I think is so unique about you is how you merge interior design, architecture, city planning, and graphic design. And at the root of your practice is a passion for designing human experiences at a human scale. So much is changing right now, as you know, and how is human scale changing, especially in our urban environments?
It's changing quite a bit. I mean, I think architects and designers were some of the few that could actually tell you what 6 feet looked like off the top of their head before all of this happened. But now all of a sudden, everybody knows how big 6 feet is. And I think that we're using spaces with that metric in mind. It's really interesting. I live on the Beltline here in Atlanta, which is a rail trails project. So Atlanta as a city is an old railroad town, and there was a big loop that ran around the in-town neighborhoods for trains to be able to turn around. And so that over time, all the trains have gone, and now it's a trail, future transit, a large corridor, 22 miles that loops around the city, and I live on a piece of that.
Very cool.
And so if you're on the Beltline, you can get to grocery stores, you can get to the park, you can pretty much do anything you want to do. So I take almost daily walks, and a few weeks ago, you would see 1 or 2 people out, and everybody's kind of checking each other out, and I don't want to get near you. Whereas, at the beginning of the year, everybody's like, arm to arm, and it's packed, And I was out yesterday, and all of a sudden you could see that 6-foot dimension of people kind of like leaning back and leaning forward. And I think that idea of what is the scale of comfort and what is that sort of like human experience, what makes you comfortable, what makes you feel safe. And right now it is that 6-foot dimension. I think in the future, we're going to get back to the arm in arm at some point, that this is a moment in time. It's not our first pandemic. It's not our first major public health crisis. It's just the first one of this generation where we're experiencing something globally in a way that we can discuss as a global forum, that this form of communication was not around during the Black Plague. So, we couldn't talk about it in that way, but now we can. And so as we get back to kind of normalcy, I'll say, I think we are going to get back to, being clustered. But I do have a feeling, just like with any kind of traumatic experience you go through, you have things that you hold with you. And I think this 6-foot dimension thing is something that people are going to actually hold a little bit, that I feel like 6 feet is going to be some sort of new number that we're all able to dimensionally talk about in a way that we never had before. So I'm super fascinated to see how that starts to play out.
Ah.
But I feel like we're going to get back to togetherness. We're going to get back to being environments, being in tighter, kind of more human scale environments. But right now, people are looking for big spaces and really networked spaces. So some spaces that are small, some spaces that are big.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, we've been thinking so much about that ourselves, and certainly 6 feet is our new denominator. Speaking of that, and with your experience with innovative districts, right? How do you think innovative districts have maybe even a greater role through this, and how we are starting to re-engage with our urban environments? Can you talk a little bit about that thought?
And by innovative, you mean in their design itself or through the program?
Yeah. Well, I've seen some of the work you've done with branding districts, and taking a multi-block area, and really creating a whole innovative district out of it is kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna see some stops and starts. I think with these sorts of spaces that. I've been saying for a few years now that development, we'll say pre-COVID development times, that we were starting to get at our hardest places in cities to develop, that all the easy sites were taken. And you know this quite well in your practice where you work on a lot of hard sites, and I do as well, that the easy sites are taken, and so we're focused on the hard sites. And so I think we're going to continue to see that sort of focus, and the question is, which ones are going to rise to the top, whether it's spaces that have opportunity zone funding, or if it's spaces near health institutions that people feel comfortable and safe being near. So I think that there's something about the types of environments that we're going to continue to see rise as people get back to what's essential to them. But I think they're going to be the messy, they're going to be the complex sites, and they're going to continue to make our cities better. I think the question with how design might change or how they might actually develop has a lot to do with open space probably, and streets that, in past projects when I'm looking at 40, 50, 60, 100 and whatever acres, a lot of times the capital improvements that you would put into a site early on would be simple, that you're doing simple infrastructure, simple streetscapes, you save the park for midway, or that it's not about getting the open space in phase one. And I think that's actually going to be a shift. I think we're going to start to look at what are the big communal spaces that make people feel safe and comfortable, as we've rediscovered kind of park space and open spaces as being essential to our daily lives. And I think that those are the ones that those are the spaces that people are going to start to invest in as their future tenants and their future residents and their future communities are looking for more of that. So I think the sites are still going to be tricky. They're still going to get developed, though the sequencing might be different. But I think the types of infrastructure and the types of capital improvements we're putting in early are probably going to start to shift.
Well, and I think what's interesting about that is, we're in such an amazing period of sharing right now and collaboration. And I think that there's a real opportunity business-wise and urban design-wise for that to manifest itself physically. And like you said, creating maybe some shared opportunities that help distribute the density that maybe is really challenged in a smaller space right now, so that you can expand your business. We've been reading about, towns, stopping car traffic, right? And really allowing the street to become part of the restaurant, part of the retail experience. And so that, I think, is something that's really interesting, and kind of getting back to the 6 foot grid that's kind of laid over, right, our urban environments.
Well, and I think we're going to continue to see that sort of thinking, that multi-purpose, multi-dimensional sort of thinking coming out. I think this is, as we were talking about earlier, we're doing 10 years of innovation in 10 weeks, and what we're finding is what we used to say, we can't live without this. Now all of a sudden it's not essential. Like, what is essential and what is not essential is becoming super, super clear. And so having a drive lane, for 3 drive lanes of cars and on-street parking and all of this actually is not essential. being able to get people outside in a way that they can socialize, because we're social creatures, that they can be safe and have that 6-foot window, and that they can actually get some light and air and not be cooped in their house, is a big deal. And we're bringing that to our public realm. And I think we're getting back to the publicness of that all of a sudden it's not just about, where the transportation department or the utility department or this or that or whatever. It's what do people need from their communities? What do people need from their public realm of their built environment in said community?
It's interesting. It's totally redefining essential. You're so right. One thing I love about you is that you love a knotty problem.
I do love knotty problem.
You love a knotty problem with a K. My question to you is, are we getting knottier? Or does our current situation streamline some of the conversations, such as the need to source locally, environmental responsibility, inclusivity? Are these now givens and kind of taken away from the knot, or are we just a tangled up mess right now?
I think we're getting simpler. I think that so for those of you that are listening, knotty problems, my analogy that Sarah knows quite well, is for me, planning is like a tangled knot. It's like all the yarns of thread are all kind of bunched up. The tighter the knot, the happier Cassie is. I think we are getting simpler, because the thing about the knotty problems is that the definition of what you can do is there's no guardrails. And I think that we're starting to get guardrails on some of our decision making, that, sourcing locally is really important, because you could just not have anything, isn't it really great in cities that haven't seen blue sky in centuries or decades, I should say, are seeing blue skies? That I think we're hitting a pivot point with all of these different sorts of pieces, kind of a reset of sorts, whether we want to or not, because we are experiencing life in different ways. And so I think some of those threads of the knot are just kind of like slowly making their way out. But at the same time, other things are getting tighter. Our economic situation, our economic crises, that knot is as tight as it can be right now. As of yesterday morning, I'm sure you're following the Department of Labor's updates weekly. It's, the number was over 38 million now of unemployed people across the U.S. And granted, that's a U.S. statistic. Perkins&Will is a firm, we think globally, but that's an indicator of what's going on in other places. And I think I've got this number right, that around 40% of those people were making less than $40,000. Oh. So the income gap between the haves and the have-nots is going to increase substantially. So, those are the kinds of knots that are going to be the big challenge that I think we have to come together as communities, whether it's, I'm so proud to see states coming together in regional coalitions. Places within cities that didn't talk to each other are realizing that all of our boats are tied together, and we have to figure out how to rise them together. So, I'm comforted when I think about those numbers, in the fact that we're realizing that we can work together to make positive change. And so what are the knottiest of the knots, and how can we come together? And so that's, that's a slightly glass half full attitude. But that I'm an optimistic person. I can't not have that sort of attitude. But I do think that we're looking around and we're looking for how can we do things better the next time. Our systems failed us. How can we get our systems working in the right way, and make sure that next time there's a public health crisis, we're stronger, better. Next time there's an economic crisis, we're stronger, better. I think we're getting smarter. I'd like to think we're getting smarter very quickly.
I would like to think that too. I think what I've so enjoyed about the chatting that I'm doing right now with people such as yourself is that the brains are going, right? People are innovating, like you said, in 10 years and 10 weeks. And so it's really exciting, I think, to see what we can be doing and what we already are doing. And a lot of it comes down to that collaboration, right? That sharing and just we're stronger together. All the boats rise together. And that's something that is very near and dear to me as well. That really, really is something that motivates me. All right. So if you could travel to any city right now to be experiencing it in this new light, where would it be?
So I have a favorite city in the whole world, and I will always want to go there. This will always be the answer, and it is Paris. I am a huge Parisian at heart. It is the first city, international city, that I ever went to my entire life. My parents never did like big international vacations. When I was a kid, we always went and visited our family. So when I was an undergrad at FSU, I went and spent a summer in Paris at 19, and it forever changed my life. And if you take all of my study abroads and all of my vacations and you add them up, I've spent almost a year of my life in that city. And it is a city of publicness, that the idea of a civic community, of people on streets, of sidewalk cafes, of people in parks, that's Paris for me. And I think, experiencing it right now would be like some sort of fascinating, almost scientific experience of sorts, of like seeing the city without it being animated. I think it would be fascinating.
I know. That's so cool. Hopefully you get to go.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get on a plane right now. But
no, I'm not yearning for that at all right now.
Yeah.
So, speaking of what changed you at age 19, what's changing you now? How are you changing as a designer and a leader?
Well, I'm spending a lot of time on calls like this of connecting with my teams and my clients and my peers and people across the design profession over the phone. And I think it takes a different sort of concentration and a different sort of patience, and you read body language in a different way. It's also, it's very weird to be in your home talking to everyone. It's very personal. It feels like we're letting people into our lives differently. And I think I'm becoming more casual and also more formal, like simultaneously, that there's something in that's occurring. And then on the flip side, I think that I'm getting a little bit more patient, which my mom would tell me is really healthy and good for me, because you can only do so much.
Yeah.
And I'm one of those people that if I could do everything all the time, I absolutely would. And so I'm trying to make sure I prioritize and remember that it's okay, that I'm healthy. I have a very nice roof over my head, and I'm fortunate because I get to do something I love. And so I should be patient, and it'll all work itself out.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And Cassie, thanks for chatting with me today. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. I mean, anytime I get to spend time with you, it's
I know. I'm so excited. And hopefully we get to see each other again soon.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.